It is time for us to begin. We'll be looking at Daniel chapter 7 and 8 and looking at the chiastic structures of both, something we didn't look at after chapter 7. Yeah, that's fine, Randy. Thank you. So I challenged you with looking at chapter 7 and 8 and trying to figure out some structure, see if you could find the chiastic structure. And we'll do that in just a moment. Before we do, let's begin with a word of prayer. Our wonderful, merciful Savior, thank you so much for the grace and mercy that you have given us. Thank you for the compassion and the love. Thank you for showing us favor, that while we were still sinners, you sought after us. That even before we were founded in this earth, you were laying out your plans so that all could come to know your glory and to live in your presence for eternity. As we consider the writings and the records of Daniel, help us, Father, to see the power and the intention and the beauty of your plan. To see you at work in every aspect of what took place, both in the time of Daniel and the times to follow, and even the times that will continue to follow after us. Help us to put our hope in who you are and all that you have promised. And this you pray in your Son, our Savior's name. Amen. All right. So Daniel chapters 7 and 8 are what we're going to look at as a quick review. If you look at Daniel chapter 7, as we kind of think through what takes place there, what happens at the beginning of Daniel chapter 7? What does Daniel see? Have we forgotten already? What does Daniel see in Daniel chapter 7? A vision of what? 4 beasts. Thank you, Kay. So Daniel sees these 4 beasts like animals who exercise dominion over the land, and they conquer one another, and there's all this battling going on, and ultimately this 4th beast that is absolutely atrocious. What comes after the 4th beast in the vision, though? After Daniel sees these 4 beasts, what's the next thing that he sees in Daniel chapter 7? The Ancient of Days enters the scene, and here come the thrones, and here comes everything that is going to judge the 4th beast, and all the beasts, ultimately. And when the Ancient of Days comes, what comes next in his vision? I'm sorry? Not to the interpretation yet. So the Ancient of Days come, and then someone else comes on the scene. Someone like the Son of Man. And what does he receive? Everlasting dominion. So this starts with the animals, the 4 beasts that are exercising dominion, but the Son of Man comes and receives everlasting dominion. And as a result, verses 15 and 16, Daniel is completely alarmed. He's beside himself. This is unlike anything that I can understand. I can't make sense of this. And then, as Kay pointed out, we get the interpretations as to what the beasts and the one like a son of man means. So we have the angel come in and start to tell, what does this all mean? And as he's explaining these things, Daniel has a question. What's his question? Verses 19 through 22, if you want to look at that section. What does he want to know? The truth. Daniel says, tell me the truth. I want to know the truth of what this means. And ultimately, even going so far as to realize in asking for that truth that this war is taking place. And he makes the note in verse 22 that the war continues until the Ancient of Days comes. Okay? And in response to this question, the angel continues to elaborate on in the vision and what it means, continuing specifically to talk about the fourth beast and its horns. And then what happens at the end of the book? Or end of chapter, not the book. Chapter 7. Daniel is alarmed by what he sees and what he thinks about, and he's trying to understand all this, and he's alarmed by it. This is overwhelming. Okay? Where's our chiastic structure? Is there one? Miss Kay, what do you got? Okay, so we could maybe see that you have the vision, and then 1 through 8, and then 9 through 14, where we see the Ancient of Days come and the Son of Man comes. It seems to be the transition in the narrative to where then we see 15 through 28 as kind of the downhill slope. Okay? The challenge with that when thinking through a chiastic structure is the imagery is exactly related. So what Miss Kay is seeing, we might elaborate in English terms to talk about the climax of the story or the narrative, and then something changes and everything goes a different way afterwards. So I think that was more like our modern, the climax of this narrative in the book is 9 through 14. But that doesn't follow a chiastic structure, because it's not repeating the imagery or phrases or intentionality behind the sections on both ends. We should see a paralleling. So, anyone else? It was a good attempt. I think that's a beautiful image to see. I don't want to discount what Kay pointed out there. So the answer might be that there's not just one, there's two. There's two chiastic structures in this one. So, here we go. We have 1 through 14 forms its own chiastic structure. As you see, Daniel sees the 4 beasts who exercise dominion. Once the Ancient of Days comes, everything changes, and we go to seeing who receives the everlasting dominion. And so just in the vision alone, it's pointing something out. So if we just look at that first one, 1 through 14, what is the chiastic structure pointing out? Well, the vision, specifically what part of the vision? The Ancient of Days. When the Ancient of Days comes on the scene, everything changes. And he has the authority and the dominion and the rule to assign everlasting dominion. And as we look at the second one then, Daniel is alarmed both in verse 15 through 16 and then 28. And we see the angel interpreting in verses 17 through 18 and then continuing to interpret or elaborate in 23 through 27. And then in 19 through 22, Daniel inquires about the truth. And we have this idea that the war, the truth of the matter is, it's going to continue until the Ancient of Days acts. And so we have two chiastic structures, and maybe if you want some headings to that, we have then, you could kind of title your two sections that we have Daniel seeing the vision of the four beasts and the two figures in heaven. And then in the second half, we have the angel interpreting those elements. That's natural. We see that in the text, but within them, there's those two structures. And so, what is the point of chapter 7? It's emphasized twice. What's the point of chapter 7? Yeah, Ancient of Days is the ultimate say. He's over all of it. When he decides to act, everything else, it doesn't matter how vicious or how vile or how overwhelming or how oppressive it is. When he acts, it's done. And remember, this is in the section that's in Aramaic. This is still in the section that is for the world leaders. This is in the section that is for all the nations to understand. It's in the diplomatic language of the time. So this becomes a really important image within the Daniel narrative as it's wrapping up the Daniel chapter 2 through 7, that it's really trying to impress. It doesn't matter who the beast is. It matters who the Ancient of Days is. Okay, questions on chapter 7 there? Or any other thoughts? Ms. Kay. The second chiastic structure, it's this lower half here. So it's going to be verses, oh, nope, wrong button. Well, there's that. There we go. This button. So it's going to be in this second half here. So verses 15 through 16 is the first point, where it's Daniel is alarmed by what he sees. Then going below that, working 17 through 18, the angel interpreting the dream. And then the center of the chiasm there is 19 through 22, where Daniel is seeking the truth. And then working our way back out, we have the angel elaborating or interpreting more on the fourth beast in 23 through 27, and then Daniel alarmed by what he sees or thinks or is considering in verse 28. Did you catch all that? Do I need to? (23 through 27). That's the angel continuing interpretation or elaborating on the interpretation. And then verse 28 is Daniel being alarmed again. So we see that mirroring of being alarmed. We see the mirroring of the angel interpreting or explaining the dream. And then that puts at the center the truth, which is the war continues until the Ancient of Days comes. Did I see a hand over here? Okay. All right, let's try Daniel chapter 8. What happens at the beginning of Daniel chapter 8? A vision, right? This one, it breaks down a little bit more. So we see within the vision, as we kind of work through it, that Daniel, the first thing he sees is what? The ram. I'm going to read lips as best I can, but it helps if you say it out loud. The ram that becomes great, right? So he comes on the scene, he's on the Ulai Canal, and he sees this ram that becomes great and is conquering. But what comes next? A flying goat. A flying unicorn goat. A flying goat with one horn, a conspicuous horn. And what does that goat do? Struck the ram. What was the other way it would say? Trampled the ram, struck the ram, ultimately defeats the ram. right? Takes away its power. And then what happens next with the goat? Because it's one horn falls off, and what comes out? Not quite to the little horn yet. The four horns. Yeah, we get the four horns. So he sees a goat with four conspicuous horns. And then comes, as Miss Kay pointed out, a little horn that comes and becomes exceedingly great. The same imagery there. And then what happens after that? If you're looking at the verses on the board, you'll see next would be verses 13 through 14. What happens? We get the how long question, which ultimately leads to Daniel hearing about the vision, getting an interpretation of the vision. That how long statement will become important in chapter 9 as well. To which Daniel says, I don't understand what I'm seeing. This is crazy. I don't get it. Verses 15 through 16. And what's the response? Verses 17 through 18. What's the response? It's for the time of the end. This is not for now. This is a vision for the time of the end. After which the angel in verse 19 clarifies and speaks of the latter day of the indignation. And then what happens in 20 through 21? What is told? What is clarified about the vision? Yeah, who the ram and the goat are. Specifically, that we have the Medes and the Persians and Greece. After which the angel continues to speak and talks about this malicious little horn without identifying who it is, but adds more interpretation. And ultimately, in verse 26, what do we get clarification of? This isn't for now. This is for later. This vision is for many days from now. And the book ends with Daniel completely confused. I don't get it. All right? Where's our chiastic structure? Okay, 1 through 12 is the vision. Is that defining the chiastic structure? What do you see here that makes sense, or what parallels first to last? What sandwiches a central point? Ida's going to give it a shot. Oh. Oh. Oh, she was counting the lines, trying to figure it out. Got it. I'll give you a hint. It's like chapter 7. There's 2 of them. What do you got, Aubriana? Okay.
And then the second chiasm would be 17 through 18 to 27.
Yeah, well, 15 through 16
Oh,
through
15
the end.
through
Yeah,
16, yes.
You had the right division, though. Yeah, the first one goes from verses 1 through verse 14, and then the second one goes from 15 to 27. So let's take a look at that. I'll just help spread it out like we've done before. So what becomes the prominent message in these 2 chiasms? Say what? Okay, so in the second half, or in both of them, we see Daniel seeing a vision and then hearing a vision at the beginning and end, and then he doesn't understand, and it still doesn't understand on the second one. That starts to create this sandwiching effect, or the chiasm structure. What is at the central point of both chiasms? I'm sorry, say that again. The time of the end. As we kind of work our way in on the second one, yes, 17 through 18 and verse 26 both speak about the time of the end, or many days from now. But those aren't the center. What do you got, Ida?
Greece and Persia, the goat and the ram.
Okay, so we have the goat and the ram. The goat specifically defeating the ram in verses 6 through 7 is the central focus here. That a weaker, lesser animal with less stout of horn. I mean, he's got one horn, but the ram is built for battle. The lesser horned, or the lesser animal, conquers the greater. And then it clarifies in the latter half, in the second chiasm, that the ram and the goat are the Medo-Persian and the Greek empires. And at the time of Daniel, even if they were starting to create their own empires, they were so small. Who could imagine that they would conquer Babylon? Who could imagine that Greece, this tiny little nation, town, city, state, would grow up and conquer? Why is it important to see this? If you want to add some headings, I'll throw those up there. That again, we have him seeing the vision and now hearing the interpretation. And both of those give us the chiastic structure. Chapter 8, why is it important? Why is it so important, in fact, that it becomes the central focus of both chiastic structures? Can you figure it out? Or have any thoughts on it or questions? Okay, so maybe a warning that the Medo-Persians are going to conquer Babylon. What's changed? No, go ahead, Scott. Okay.
That there's silence, the 400 years before Christ comes.
Sure.
So it's during that time, but this is like showing that God hasn't left.
Okay.
The Ancient of Days, the Most High, is still behind the scenes working, and I think it's something for them to witness throughout their upcoming history,
Okay.
and be able to go, aha, God's still following His plan, and they can see that He hasn't left. He's just quiet right now.
Yeah. I think Lisa had something she's going to offer. I'm going to make a comment before she does. It's interesting that it's really can be difficult when someone says, trust me, God's working even if you can't figure it out. It gives a little bit more confidence if God has already told you what to expect as you're going through those things. If he were to say that you're going to have this happen to your house or to your job, and this is going to be for the good of you and the nation and my people, it doesn't make it go away. It's still hard, but it creates a certain level of confidence in the Almighty, the Ancient of Days, to be able to see that God is still working. And part of that narrative is in the message that the tribulation will end. This tough time will end. Go ahead, Lisa.
Well, Daniel dies before the restoration of Israel, before everybody returns back to Israel, and that's under Darius. That he tells him to seal this up. I just have a hard time understanding why, unless it's just that it's something that will get carried with them back to the land, or I don't know if we're going to get that sooner or later from all of this, but he has no way of, I would be disturbed too, probably, if I saw something that I had no idea of.
Sure.
Because once you get past Darius and Cyrus, he's not there when Alexander comes. He's not going to see any of this occur. So, I don't know, I just found it difficult in that he knows it's going to happen a long time from now, but for him to see something, if one of us saw something that we thought was in the future, or that definitely was going to be in the future, how is this going to be distributed out, I guess is what I want to say, to the people at a later time?
Yeah. Part of, Mark was that a thought on that or a separate?
Just a couple of other things.
Yeah, okay. Go ahead,
right.
and then I might come back if I need to.
Well, the fact that God is saying this little nobody nation is going to be the next power confirms that this is the word of God.
Okay.
And that would have been their confirmation.
Yeah.
But I just can't help but see Jesus in some of this. And not that he's named specifically, although this Son of Man, who's it going to be? And then later on when we get into this in chapter 9
Yeah.
as well. There are allusions to what's going to happen. As far as what the end is, we see that it's an end for what he's looking for, an end to. We want the temple again. We want these things to happen again.
Yeah.
So there's going to be you're paying for it now, is what we're going to see in chapter 9. You're paying for it now. There will be an end. But there's an end to the entire Judeo system that God established, and he's giving it to all mankind.
Yeah.
And that's that thread that nobody finds out until much later.
Yeah. You know, to kind of answer, hopefully, or address part of what you were asking, Lisa, you know, all throughout the Old Testament, God is revealing his plan. And he does it in a way where no man at that time understands. No man fully understands how the Messiah would be both suffering servant and conquering king for Isaiah. No man understands how important it is to see the sign of Jonah as a sign of the Messiah to come. No one understands those things. This is a little more forward in its approach in saying, I'm telling you this and I'm making it clear, even though you don't understand it, and you won't understand it until the time comes. So go ahead and just seal it up, and it'll all make sense when it happens. And so part of what happens through prophecy, and this one specifically, is this is not meant to be the only prophecy that gives confidence in God, but it becomes a massive building block when God follows through on it to reinforce to the people of Israel. Do you remember what God told Daniel that we were all confused about, that he seemed distraught over? Do you remember that? Yeah, it's come true now. And so part of it isn't that it was for Daniel fully to understand and make sense of and do something with. As you pointed out, he's not going to see the absolute fulfillment of all this. Now, he'll see the Medes and Persians come in. He'll see parts of it and receive confirmation in bits that God is starting to act on these things, so that when he does die, he has confidence that God is following through. And sometimes what we see in our lives is God start to fulfill things and work things out with people and churches and different groups that we've been praying for and working hard for. We don't see what it builds, but we gain that confidence that God's still working in all of that. Aaron, and then if you had a follow-up on that, Lisa. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's right. A couple things is, one, this prophecy is not happening anytime soon, and you're not going to understand everything in it, and it's okay. And then I think we get kind of confused with the term "seal it." It's more of the idea of preservation.
Yeah.
So preserve this is maybe a more helpful way to think about it. Preserve this for a later time, because this prophecy is in the future, so
Sure.
we're going to preserve it so that when it does happen, you have these words to refer back to, is the concept
Seal it
there.
with the king's signet mark and make sure that people know it's valid and true, and that when it is opened at the right time
Right.
and gets to the right recipient, it all makes sense and has not lost its authenticity.
Yep.
Yeah, that this becomes that to the people of Israel. And keep in mind, we've now switched back to Hebrew. And so part of what the message to the Hebrews is, yeah, you're under Babylonian captivity. Captivity is not going to end till you get through the Medes and the Persians. And then they're going to come the Greek. You aren't going to really have your temple and this relationship with God again in full. You aren't going to have that glory in full for a long time. But God will choose when it'll be. And He won't forget you. And He's not throwing you out. He's remembering you as a people. And so it's meant to reinstate for the Hebrew people, as Daniel starts to write to the Israelites again in chapter 8, that God is still working. You may not understand His plan fully, but live faithfully. Know that there will come an end to this tribulation. Thoughts, questions on that? Anything else that comes from looking at this structure? Ms. Kay?
So what are the two structures in 8?
The two structures in 8. Would it be helpful if I give you a copy after this?
Uh-huh.
Okay, I'll do that for you. I'll get that back to you because they're a little bit longer than the last one, and I want to be able to get a little bit into chapter 9 if we can. If anyone else wants a copy of these, I'll be glad to do that as well. All right. Any other questions or observations? Go ahead, Scott. Thank you.
I think it's cool that you do see that switch from the Aramaic to the Hebrew, which says that God's speaking to both.
Yes.
In this time, and so when this stuff comes to pass, even we'll just call them Gentiles, have an opportunity to see God through this, and we know it's a glimpse of He's working in their lives just as much, and desires for them to be a part of His plan. And so it's interesting the way it works, that He's using them in moments, but they have the opportunity to see that even in their history too later, and be able to see that God always worked with the Gentiles just as much,
For sure.
or whatever. And so I like seeing that. I'm glad you brought all that out, that we get to witness both of those happening at the same time.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting how Daniel then highlights, even just looking at chapter 7 and chapter 8, what's the narrative that the Gentile nations need to understand in chapter 7? The Ancient of Days has authority, no king or kingdom does. What is the message that chapter 8 is telling, that the Hebrew nation needs to be reminded of? Well, maybe a little the same. There's a nuance here in my mind in that they already know who the Ancient of Days is. What they're needing to be reminded of while they're in the midst of this trial and tribulation, and they're nearly, if estimates are right, they're probably 65 to 68 years into the exile, that God has not forgotten you. God is still working His plan, and what might come next might not look like it. But it will all come to an end in God's perfect time. Which is why the angel asks, how long? Can you please hurry it up? We've been here a long time. I've been in this trial for a little too long. It's like, I think I've learned my lesson. Can we go back? God's got it. He's going to see you through it. I think I saw a hand. Did I? Nope. Okay. So chapter 9 then. Oh, I said, did I see a hand? You pointed at someone else and now you want it? Go ahead. What you got?
So in Malachi, it talks about God coming back suddenly to His temple.
Okay.
Is that the end of the indignation when the relationship goes back?
Not specifically as it relates to, and you're going to Malachi, which is not where we're at, by the way. But with Malachi, if I remember correctly, he's more prophesying to the point where Christ will come, whereas Daniel is prophesying to the conquering of the Medes and Persians and then the Greeks. And as we talked about, foreshadowing and telling and prophesying that there will come a time when the Jews have access to the temple again. And we see that in the Maccabean revolts, and we see that in them having access to the temple. Now, part of what they don't understand is they mess it up, and they don't receive the full benefit of that. And so does Daniel ultimately point to, in some ways, the Messiah and God's glory coming to his temple in a heavenly sense? Absolutely. But I think we have to remember Daniel 8 is really about the Greeks and the Medes and the Persians, and a certain thing that happens when that period of time is fulfilled. That there is a tendency that the end of the tribulation or the end times, we want to lump them all together. But as was pointed out last week, there are multiple periods that are the end times or the end of the time or the day of judgment, we have these, and they somehow have nuances and implications to them. So can we tie it to Malachi in some ways? Yes. I don't think that's the main thrust of 8 and 9 though, or chapter 8. So, all right, chapter 9. In the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, by descent a Mede, and who was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, perceived in the books the number of years that, according to the word of the Lord to Jeremiah the prophet, must pass before the end of the desolations of Jerusalem, namely 70 years. All right, take a moment, mark that up, and we'll look at our observations and questions in just a moment. Okay, what do you see? What questions do you have in those first two verses? Gary.
Well, this was not a vision.
Okay.
And I haven't written down where in Jeremiah the 70 years are mentioned, but Jeremiah very plainly said they would be in captivity 70 years, and Daniel read that. And
yeah. Okay, so we have two thoughts here. Mark's going to have a comment after. One, we instantly get rooted back in history, right? We're not in a vision. We don't, at least at this point, we don't see a vision, and I would say we don't see one in chapter 9. What we get here is we're back in history. This is actual things that happened, and it points out that Daniel goes back and is reading the old writings, and he's reading Jeremiah. Now, what's beautiful about this?
Yeah, that was my statement, is he's been captured, and by the grace of God and his captors, he has this book he gets to read.
Yeah.
God is really working here. It's amazing to see this.
Isn't that beautiful? That 65 years after they have been, or probably 67, 68 years now after they've been captured, Daniel still has access to the writings of God and his prophets. When everything else has been destroyed, all their hope is gone, he goes back and he has access to these ancient writings. And he's reading Jeremiah, and he gets back to, as is noted in the original scroll, I promise, chapter 25 and verse 12. No, it's not there. It's just a writing on a scroll. He's reading through it, and he gets to this paragraph, and he's reading, and it says, at verse 11, "This whole land shall become a ruin and a waste, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years. Then after 70 years are completed, I will punish the king of Babylon and that nation, the land of the Chaldeans, for their iniquity, declares the Lord, making the land an everlasting waste. I will bring upon that land all the words that I have uttered against it, everything written in this book, which Jeremiah prophesied against all the nations. For many nations and great kings shall make slaves even of them, and I will recompense them according to their deeds and the work of their hands." Isn't that comforting thought? Ida's going to have a comment. Isn't that a comforting thought when you're in captivity under the Babylonians, that God is saying, I'm going to judge them and wipe them out. They'll answer for their iniquities, and it'll only be 70 years after it begins. And Daniel's roughly 538, the first year of Darius, in 538 BC, just a couple years from being returned from captivity, and he's going, hey, I've counted, God. We're close to 70. This should be coming to an end. And that gets him excited. What do you got, Ida?
This isn't as glorious as that. It's just a simple observation.
I like simple too.
That here is Daniel, who received all these visions, and angels explain things to him. But what is he doing? He's doing his Bible study.
Yeah.
He's turning to the Lord. He's looking for more information. What greater example can we have of what we should be doing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That in all of this, he's doing his study of the Scriptures. And look at what confidence and encouragement that provides for him. If we think in the terms of those visions that he's seen, what does chapter 9 open and really try to highlight for us? Even all the way back to chapter 2's image of this tower, or this mighty statue. Remember the four-parted statue. What do we start to see in chapter 9? Fulfillment. Well, how? It says, verse 1. Verse 1. By descent a Mede. Darius is a Mede. What does that mean? Chapter 8 is starting to come true. The Medes and Persians are taking over. God's already starting to fulfill his promises. And what does he get control over? The realm of the Chaldeans, the Babylonians. This is the same, the Chaldeans that was mentioned in Jeremiah chapter 25, where he says that it's the king of Babylon and that nation, the land of the Chaldeans. It's also confirmed by the way we see in chapter 5 and verse 30, where Belshazzar is the Chaldean king. And so what are we seeing? God starting to fulfill his prophecy. Babylon is going to be taken down. The Medes and Persians are coming in to have that control. And David starts to perceive that this is the truth. That this is exactly what's going to happen. All right. So, with that, we'll pick up in verse 3 next week of chapter 9 and continue our study there. Appreciate your attention and thoughts on both the chiastic structures and coming into chapter 9. We'll continue next week.